Good morning. If you're joining me here on Zoom, go ahead and log in or type your name in the chat box for me. It is Monday morning and we are in class 2 of our reading class. And I'm just going to give a couple of minutes for people to join before we get started. Thank you, Kenneth. I see you there. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. We're just going to give a couple of minutes to let some other people join if they're going to join, and then we'll get started. I go ahead and start sharing my screen with you. Excuse me. I'm going to drag my chat box over here so I can see it and get situated. Okay. Doesn't look like anybody's trying to join us, so I will go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about theme and main idea. And I have just a little bit of useless information for you here. Too much coffee can kill you. A lethal dose of caffeine for the average adult is somewhere around 10 grams, or the equivalent of drinking between 50 and 200 cups of coffee in rapid succession. Wow. I love coffee, but I don't know if I could drink that much. But I know some people that probably could. I have to have my coffee in the morning because I can't really hear words until I've had coffee. Do you like coffee? My husband is not a coffee drinker at all. He'd rather have sweet tea. But like I said, we're going to talk about theme and main idea today. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I don't know if you've ever watched the show Barnwood Builders. This is one of my favorite shows to watch on TV. It's very interesting. It's about a group of guys from West Virginia, and they go all over the country to take down old log barns, like Pioneer Day barns from like the 1800s. And they disassemble the old barns and they pack up the timbers, the logs, and then they take them back to what they call the boneyard, and they store them there until they sell them to customers that want to build like a log cabin, like a log cabin home or something like that. And they make these big, beautiful log cabin homes that kind of look something like this. And I just think these are so cool. Like this would be my dream house. One of these days I'll have like a log cabin home, but it's really cool to watch. And I grew up with my father was a carpenter and a drywaller, and he had two cousins that he worked with. They had their own business and they would go around building houses. So this is something that I'm very familiar with, the process of building houses. But if you think about building a house, you have to start with a good, solid foundation. It has to be level and it has to be solid to where it's not going to give or crack or move. So it looks something like this, usually like a concrete pad, or it could be on blocks, but it has to be very sturdy and very level. And then after you get your foundation poured or set, you're going to put up something like this, like some framing. These are the Barnwood Builder guys here. If the building doesn't have that good foundation, these aren't going to set right, the structure. These are what we would call like the bones or the structure. And if you don't have a good foundation and good bones, then over time, and probably pretty quickly, you're going to have something like this. So it's going to start dilapidating and falling down. It's going to be unlevel, and it's just going to deteriorate pretty quickly, like this old house right here. So you say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with if you think about a book or a story, authors kind of use the same process. So they have to start with a solid base, and then they have to create the structure or the bones. They call their authors or writers call their foundation the main idea or central theme. Main idea and central theme are both the same thing. You'll hear it used both ways. I usually say main idea. The main idea is the thought that a writer wants you to know, or the gist. The gist is the real point of action, the essence of the text or speech. So it's the main idea, what they want you to know. So when you're reading, we need to ask ourselves, what did the author or the storyteller want me to know? What is the gist or what is the point of the story? We do that by asking ourselves questions like where, who, what, when, why, how. Those are the kind of things that we should be asking ourselves when we're reading a story and we're trying to figure out what the main idea is. Usually, if you can write a summary is something that's like 10 words or less, or maybe a couple of sentences. But basically, a summary is just something that is a short synopsis or summary of the story itself. Okay. So this is just a sheet that could be handy whenever you're reading a story or a book or something like that. This can help you figure out what the main idea is. And it has those key questions like who, what, when, where, why, and how. So if you have a piece of paper, if you don't, I'll give you a couple minutes to go get a piece of paper and a pencil. And you can jot these questions down like this real quick, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that right now, because we're going to do a little story. So just go ahead and stop what you're doing, get you a pen and paper. Whenever you've got your paper and you're ready to go, just give me I'm ready in the chat box. Okay, do you have your paper ready with you? Okay, so I am going to read you a little story, and it's probably one that you've heard before. It's the Little Red Riding Hood. That's a classic story. You've probably heard it. And as I'm reading the story, just kind of think about these questions: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay. Let's see here. Got to get my screen ready. Okay. So the Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a village near the forest. Whenever she went out, the little girl wore a red riding cloak. So everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood asked her mother if she could go visit her grandmother because she had not been feeling well and it had been a while since they'd seen each other. That's a good idea. That will cheer her up and make her feel better, her mother said. So they packed a nice basket of food for Little Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother. When the basket was ready, the little girl put on her red cloak and kissed her mother goodbye. Remember to go straight to grandmother's house, her mother cautioned. Don't dawdle along the way, and please don't talk to strangers. The woods are dangerous. Don't worry, Mommy, said the Little Red Riding Hood. I'll be careful. But when Little Red Riding Hood noticed some lovely flowers in the woods, she forgot the promise to her mother. She picked a few, watched the butterflies flit about for a while, listened to the frogs croaking, and then picked a few more. Little Red Riding Hood was enjoying the warm summer day so much that she didn't notice a dark shadow approaching out of the forest behind her until he was right beside her. A large wolf said, "Hello, little girl. What are you doing walking through these woods all alone?" "Oh, I'm heading to my grandma's house to visit and take her this basket of food because she hasn't been feeling well." "I see," said the wolf. "Well, it must be quite a way for you then." "No, it's not too far. It's just over that hill over there by a little creek. As soon as I finish picking a bouquet for her, I'm headed that way. I'll be there in no time." "Okay, then," said the wolf. "Enjoy your visit. I'll be on my way. Good day." Then the wolf disappeared into the woods. The unsuspecting girl continues with her flower picking, while the wolf hurries to find Grandma's house. The wolf, a little out of breath from running, arrived at Grandma's house, knocked lightly at the door. Grandma says weakly, "Oh, thank goodness, dear. Come in, come in. I was worried sick that something had happened to you in the forest," said Grandma, thinking that the knock was her granddaughter. The wolf let himself in. Poor Granny did not have time to say another word before the big bad wolf gobbled her up. The wolf let out a satisfied burp and then poked through Granny's wardrobe to find a nightgown that he liked. He added a frilly sleeping cap, and for good measure, he dabbed some of Granny's perfume behind his pointy ears. A few minutes later, Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. The wolf jumped into bed and pulled the covers over his nose. "Who is it?" he called in a crackly voice. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood." "Oh, how lovely. Do come in, my dear," croaked the wolf. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the little cottage, she could scarcely recognize her grandmother. "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" "Oh, it's just this cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove a point. "But grandmother, what big ears you have," said the little girl as she edged closer to the bed. "The better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big teeth you have." And Little Red Riding Hood said Little Red Riding Hood with her voice quivering slightly. "The better to eat you with, my dear," roared the wolf, and he leapt out of the bed and began to chase the little girl. Almost too late, Little Red Riding Hood realized that the person in the bed was not her grandmother, but a hungry wolf. She ran across the room and through the door, shouting, "Help! Wolf!" as loudly as she could. A woodsman who was chopping logs nearby heard her cry and ran towards the cottage as fast as he could. He grabbed the wolf and made him spit out the poor grandmother, who was a bit frazzled by the whole experience, but still in one piece. "Oh, Grandma, I was so scared," sobbed the little girl. I never I'll never speak to strangers or dawdle in the forest again." "There, there, child. You've learned an important lesson. Thank goodness you shouted loud enough for this kind woodsman to hear you." The woodsman knocked out the wolf and carried him deep into the forest where he wouldn't bother people any longer. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother had a nice lunch and a long chat. Okay, and that is the story of the Little Red Riding Hood. So, what did you think about that story? I like that story. It's kind of creepy, but it's a good story to tell. So, who were the characters in this story? Can you name at least two characters or the main characters? So, if we think about it, um, the three main characters are Little Red Riding Hood, the grandmother, and the big bad wolf. That is the who, you know, how we were talking about uh, those keywords that we're looking for, those key questions. So that is the who. Those are the characters. Little Red Riding Hood, her grandmother, and the big bad wolf. Okay. let's see. Oh, and also the huntsman was a character too. So I guess he is kind of a main character because he took care of that wolf and saved them at the end of the story. So let's talk about the what. So what happened in the story? We're going to just kind of break this down. So Little Red Riding Hood, let me move this around a little bit. So Little Red Riding Hood, she talked to a stranger and she told him where she was going. The wolf beat her to grandmother's house, ate grandma, and tried to eat Little Red Riding Hood too. And then the huntsman came along and saw the wolf and rescued grandma and Little Red Riding Hood. So that is what happened. That is the short summary. So let's talk about when. When did the story occur or happen? In this story, we don't exactly know when this happened. It was once upon a time. A lot of fairy tales that we read, our classic fairy tales, will be like this. It doesn't give you a specific time. And that's pretty common in fairy tales. Let's talk about the where. Where did the story occur? If you know where the story occurred, could you type that in the chat box for me? Where did the story happen? So the story happened in the forest or in the woods. Sometimes it's just you don't overthink it. It's not a specific place other than just in the woods and at grandmother's house. Okay, so what is the why? We're not exactly sure in this case why this occurred. Most likely, it had something to do with what was going on at the time that the writer was exposed to or aware of. Maybe something was happening where strangers were taking advantage of little girls or women, and he wrote the story to make a point. So a lot of times, especially in fairy tales, they just have like a moral point or a story to them, just based on whatever's going on at the time. And if you look at science and history stories, they usually will have a specific why. For example, in World War II, we know that World War II happened because Nazi Germany, which was ran by Adolf Hitler at the time, invaded Poland. So if we look, we can actually look those facts up and we can figure out why this happened. So in history stories, there's usually a specific why. Adolf Hitler decided he wanted to invade Poland. And then because of this, the United Kingdom and France declared war on Germany. And then many others got involved and sided with this country and so forth and so on. So that's kind of how World War II happened, the why. In science, we can think about for example, why the COVID vaccine was created. Well, it was created because we had a worldwide pandemic breakout in late 2019, early 2020. So that is why the COVID vaccine was created. So science and history, again, will always have a why, usually. Let's see. So let's talk about how. How did the story occur? Fiction stories, we don't always know how fiction stories happen exactly. Like I said, usually they're just a story to prove a point or whatever's going on at the time. But in history and science, we do often have a how. So How did Germany invade Poland? Well, we can look that up and we can find out how. How did in science, how did they create the COVID vaccine? We can also look that up and we can find out specifically how they did that. So there's usually the how in science and history stories. In fiction or made up stories, we don't always know exactly how they happen. They just happen. We don't know how the huntsman actually uh, made the wolf spit out grandma. We just know that he did. It's not realistic. Let's see. So let's talk about summarizing. If you're thinking about the story of Little Red Riding Hood, what is the summary? So the summary is the same thing. You hear summary and main idea. So the main idea is just the summary of the story. Again, that 10 words or less, or a couple of sentences that describes basically what happened. Okay, so for example, if we were summarizing Little Red Riding Hood, again, we would say she was going to go see her grandma. She talked to a stranger, which was the wolf, and the wolf ended up beating her to grandma's house and eating the grandma and trying to eat her. And then she screamed, and a huntsman came and saved them both. That would be the summary. And just as a reminder, always remember to ask yourself those key questions: the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Excuse me, I'm still fighting allergies. So if you did jot those down, just look over those: the who, what, when, where, why, how. And when you have a moment, just write out the summary of the Little Red Riding Hood. Again, it's just a couple of sentences that explains the story. Okay, we're just going to move right along and we're going to talk about theme. So the whole idea or meaning of the story or passage. So if we're thinking about that house again, or that log cabin house that we were talking about early, the theme would be the roof, or that overarching theme. Okay. Excuse me. So some examples of themes in stories or writing may be true love, struggles, could be forgiveness, hope, anger, revenge, rich versus poor, truth, help, maybe. So what do you think the theme of Little Red Riding Hood is? Just think about that for a minute. What is the theme of Little Red Riding Hood? Okay, so I think that the theme of Little Red Riding Hood is basically stranger danger, or don't talk to strangers. That was the gist of the Little Red Riding Hood story. If we think about Cinderella, the Cinderella story, what is the theme of Cinderella? I think the theme of Cinderella was true love. Cinderella finds true love in the prince. The prince in the end comes to, save her, and they live happily ever after. So that one is about true love. Lots of our fairy tales are going to be about either struggle or true love. In the story of Snow White, she is saved by true love's kiss. So that's another one that's about true love. If you've ever read the book, The Help, or watched the movie, The Help, that's one of my favorite movies. It's about maids in Alabama back in the 50s, 60s, whenever segregation was still in place. And if you ever read that book, the book is much better than the movie. I always say that, but it's true. if you think about that story, you quickly realize that the story is about struggle. So that is the theme of a story. Okay, so now we have talked about our foundation or our main idea. So we have our main idea, and then the theme would be the roof or the overall overarching idea. But how are we going to raise this roof? So we have a foundation and we have the roof, but what are we going to do to get that roof on top? So that's what we're going to be talking about next. I am going to take just a short break. It is 9:30. I will meet you back here at, we'll say 9:40. So if you need to get a drink, use the bathroom or something like that, I will meet you back here at 9:40. Okay, I'm back from break and let's see. If you're back with me, go ahead and just type yes in the chat box for me so that I know that you're ready to get started back. Got me a drink and a cough drop, so maybe I can continue on. Okay, so like I was saying, we're going to talk about how we're going to raise this roof. Okay, so we're going to talk about text structures. So remember this picture. This is where we were throwing up those bones or beams, making the structure of our house. Authors do the same thing. They build their stories through details called text structure. Okay, so types of text structure. Let's talk about different types. Authors of informational text give us clues to help us know and understand what they want us to know. They give us headings, titles, captions, maybe italics or pictures. They also organize their information in ways that help readers understand the text. The text is just the story or the written words. Text structure is how the text is organized. For example, maybe a description. They may use descriptions to give us clues. They may use compare and contrast. The text structure may be in sequential or chronological order. They may use problem and solution or cause and effect. These are all different types of text structure. Okay. The description is the details. That's the details about a person, place, thing, or event or process that they're talking about. We describe things all day, every day. Almost every time we speak, you use descriptive words. We describe, if I say it's morning or good morning, I'm describing the time of day. We use lots of descriptive words when we're excited. If we want to paint a picture for our family or friends of something interesting or exciting that happened, authors do the same thing. They use words to help us visualize the information. We'll be looking for adjectives that describe or like descriptive words and characteristics, what a person, place, or thing is like. When I think about details, I think about my daughter. When she comes home from school, she always has a story to tell me. And she gives me all kinds of details. And it's like she goes all the way around the subject. And sometimes I have to say, okay, what's the point of this story? And she's like, I'm getting to it. But she has to like set that stage and give me all the hairy details surrounding the story first. So it's pretty funny. If you think about, let's think about an apple. Okay, I want you to just visualize an apple and think about it and think about how you would describe an apple. So just take just a minute and think about that. So if I was describing an apple, the first thing that comes to mind is probably red, because I like red apples. And then probably crunchy, sweet, something to that effect. But if we think about it, there are all types of different ways to describe an apple. It could be crispy, crunchy, smooth. It could be rough on the outside, round, Apples can be green, they can be red, they can be shiny, they can be sour. My husband loves those Granny Smith apples, and I don't I don't care for them because I don't like tart, anything really tart. My husband loves tart and sour candy and fruit. I like my fruit to be sweet. Um, they could be fresh, but these are all different types of words that describe an apple. Who knew? There's so many different ways to describe an apple. So if we think about ice cream, how would you describe ice cream? Give me at least one word. Okay. The first word that comes to my mind is cold. It could also be sweet. It could be creamy, sugary. Ice cream comes in all different flavors. Um, I'm kind of a plain Jane. I know there's so many different ice creams, but I like just a good old vanilla ice cream. I think it's people just kind of overlook just the good simplicity of vanilla ice cream. But my husband likes Rocky Road. My daughter loves chocolate. There's all different types of ice cream, and we could describe it in many, many different ways. So that is details, description. That's a type of text structure. Then we have compare and contrast. Um, compare and contrast talks about similarities and differences between maybe people, places, or things. So when we're reading, some of those context clues are same, different. They may use those words. They may say both or neither, or they'll be writing and then all of a sudden they'll say in contrast or on the other hand. Those are some of those clue words. Okay. So let's think about vegetables and ice cream. So if we were going to compare and contrast, so if we're going to compare, in other words, talk about how they're alike, we could say, well, they're both food. They can both be eaten. They can both be all different types of colors, flavors. So those would be some of the things that are alike about vegetables and ice cream. Both food, both come in all different colors and all different flavors. Okay, now if we're going to contrast or talk about how they're different, we could say, well, vegetables are grown out of the earth. This is how they come, straight out of the earth. And ice cream has to be made. Like you have to add ingredients and make that. Also, vegetables are considered healthy. And ice cream is not necessarily considered healthy. Vegetables you could eat anytime with any kind of meal. Ice cream is thought of as a dessert. So that is contrast. We're talking about how they're different. For example, I could say, I like both cars and trucks. However, my favorite is a Mustang. So we're comparing, we're saying I like both cars and trucks, but my favorite is a sports car. That is compare and contrast. Okay, let's talk about sequence. Okay, or chronological order. So the text outline outlines chronological events or a list of steps in a procedure. This is what happens first. This is what happens second. This is what happens third. That is sequence or chronological order. Some of the clue words that you'll see in writing is they may say first, second, or next, then, and finally. Those are some of the clue words when you're looking to see if it's sequential or chronological text. Let's see. Let's talk about sequence and a procedure. Okay, so if I say you want delicious ice cream, first you have to go to the store and buy ice cream. Then scoop the ice cream into a bowl, top it with chocolate fudge. Finally, grab a spoon and enjoy your ice cream. That is a sequence. That is a procedure. That's me telling you what you have to do to get your ice cream. You may be telling a life story. So if you're telling someone's story, you may say he was born, he went to Jackson High School. When he graduated, he went to Jackson State College. After he graduated college, he became a banker. He got married and has 2 kids. This tells us what happened first, second, third. It's a sequence or chronological order. Biographies and history are usually written in sequence or chronological order. So are instructions, like if I'm telling you how to bake a cake, it's most likely going to be in sequence or chronological order in how you're supposed to do it. Biographies of people are always in chronological order. Some of those signal words, again, to look for: first, second, maybe next, or in the beginning, finally, lastly. Those are the type of words that give you the clue that the text is in sequence or chronological order. Okay, the next type of text structure is problem and solution. The text gives you, that means the text gives you information about a problem and explains one or more solutions. Some of the clues, the clue words to look for are going to be problem, conflict, solution, resolution. If your ice cream melts before you finish, put it back in the freezer. That is problem and solution. The problem is your ice cream is melting. The solution is put it back in the freezer so it'll refreeze. Whenever me and my husband were first married, we had a problem because my husband likes to use the toothpaste tube and he has to squeeze it from the bottom. And I'm always in a hurry. I don't pay attention. I just grab that toothpaste tube and I squeeze it wherever I pick it up at. And that would annoy my husband to no end. And he would always, get on to me. It was one of the stupidest fights we ever had in the early days of our marriage, the silly things that we fought over. And that was the problem. My solution was to get a different toothpaste tube, and he has his own toothpaste tube and I have my own toothpaste tube. And we've been that way since probably 2004. We were married in 2003. And that is the solution. The problem is it got on his nerves and then we would fight. And my solution was to get my own separate toothpaste tube and he could be happy with his squeezed neatly from the bottom and I could squeeze mine from wherever I wanted to. That was problem and solution. My niece and nephew, who spend a lot of time with us, when they were little, they would be fighting over the same toy and they would always get in a big fight and get mad at each other. And my solution would always be to say, okay, well, I'm taking the toy and nobody's playing with it. So that's another example of problem and solution. Again, some of those keywords that you may find in text is problem, conflict, solution, or resolution. Problem and conflict, they represent the same thing. Solution and resolution, same thing. Okay, then we have cause and effect. This is when the text tells about an event or cause and the effects that follow. So, for example, if I say, on the way to work, I had a flat tire and I was late to work. The cause is that I had a flat. The effect is that it made me late to work. That is cause and effect. Some of those keywords to look for when you're looking for whether the structure is cause and effect. You may see the word because. So because I had a flat tire, I was late to work. Or I could say as a result of my flat tire, I was late to work. Or due to my flat tire, I was late to work. I was driving down the road and I heard this strange sound coming from my tire. And I thought, oh no, if my tire is flat, then I'm going to be late to work. So those are examples of using these keywords. That would clue you into whether the text is written in like a cause effect structure. Okay, another cause. Because my ice cream melted, I have to go wash my hands because my hands are sticky. The cause is my ice cream was melting, and the effect is I have to go wash my hands because my hands got sticky. Okay, and that is the most common text structures. And so if we go back to thinking about our house that we built, our beautiful log cabin, we remember we started with that foundation. The foundation is the same as in a story or writing as the main idea. Oops, let's go back. The framing or what holds that roof up is the structure, the bones. That is the text structure. And if we think about the roof, that is that theme. It's the overarching idea of the whole story, the theme. And that is main idea and theme and text structure that we went over today. Okay. Do you have any questions about that? Okay. If there's no questions about that, I'm going to stop sharing that screen. And let's see here. Get out of this. Oh, wait. Move some things around so I can show you what we're going to do today. We have a few assignments today. So I'm going to actually share this screen. Okay, so this is your Google Classroom. Again, I'm just going to show you again. This is what the stream looks like. So when you first get into your Google Classroom, this is what it looks like. This is where your Zoom link will always be located and your Common Lit code to get into Common Lit to do your Common Lit assignments. If you scroll back up here, right here in the middle is classwork. This is all basic information. My bio is in there. Information about me, information about how to contact me, and my working hours are in there. Information about how to get into Common Lit. how to submit assignments, the syllabus, which is all about the class. And we've already went through class 1. So we're going to scroll on down to class 2, November 1st. That's today. And I did want to point out that in the afternoon, I do post recordings of the Zooms that we have for the day. So the lessons and where I went over the lessons, they will be posted back in here in the afternoon after class. So if you miss a class and need to watch the Zoom, they are there. Or if you just want to go back over something because you forgot something or didn't quite understand it, you can watch that again. So those are like right here, it says class 2 Zoom 1 and then class 2 Zoom 2. These will be in there this afternoon. You do not have to go, they're in there as an assignment, but if you were with me during the live Zoom, you're already going to get credit for that. So you do not have to go in and rewatch those or submit those, okay? I just wanted to point that out. So today we're going to work on main idea assignment, workplace reading skills, determine theme and summary, and analyzing text structures. I will go over these first 4 assignments when we meet back here at 11. If you get to the Common Lit, that is fine. If not, you can work on that after class or this evening, tomorrow morning, something like that. I usually just like you to have those done by the next time we meet for class, the next class day. So we're going to work on these first 4 assignments that are in today, class 2, November 1st section. And I will let you guys go. And I will meet you back here at 11 o'clock and we will go over assignments. Right now, please go ahead and type your name in the chat box to sign out. So as soon as you do that, you are free to leave the class and I will meet you back here at 11.